The following podcast is a Dear Media production.
Hi, welcome back to an audience caller episode of the Real Stuff podcast. Today's caller, we are changing her name to Josie because we are talking about quite the taboo topic and a topic that is extremely personal to her, and that is MAID, which stands for Medical Assistance in Dying. For people who don't know what MAID is, I'm just going to read you the definition. This is a legal, voluntary medical procedure that is currently available in Canada as well as several U.S. states. In the states, it's called medical aid in dying. And it's typically for patients that have irreparable medical conditions that have been causing them enduring suffering. And it is essentially a way to assist them in dying. There are eligibility requirements that a person needs to meet in order to qualify to receive this procedure. Just a few that I'm seeing here are, you must be over 18 years old. You must have a serious illness or a disease or a disability. You must be in an advanced state of decline, experience unbearable suffering. The list goes on of things that you need to do in order to give your informed consent for this procedure. But when I saw this submission come in from this audience caller, Josie, telling the story of her dad dying a few years ago through MAID, I was fascinated because this is actually a topic I have heard about. I've read a little bit about it, have no idea how I really feel about it because it's so complex and there's so much to unpack. And that's what we get into in our conversation. There's so much more that could have been part of this conversation. I feel like if I were an expert in any way in the medical field, or if I, were an expert in this particular procedure, we could have gone in many directions with this episode and maybe even presented some ethical reasons for or against the procedure. We could have gone many dimensions, as well as Josie probably could have gone even deeper with details about her relationship with her dad. And, there are so many nuances to her telling us this story and all of her thoughts around it. But I think we had a very, very fruitful conversation unpacking the dynamics and the strange nature of this conversation, and being very well aware as we were talking about the topic that this was such a strange topic to be discussing. Truly, even after talking to Josie, I am still unsure all of my feelings around this. And I'm also slightly concerned as far as the podcast goes, because obviously we are a taboo topic show. So we always have topics coming out that are like flagged by YouTube or flagged by media outlets because they're a little bit on the taboo side. And I know whenever we use the word suicide in our content, it flags it, and it often doesn't show the video to as many people. But I think this is a niche conversation that I'm hoping reaches a handful of people who are really interested in just hearing about something that they find completely out of the norm, and also reaches people who might be dealing with something similar or know a loved one who is going through this procedure. So I just love connecting with members of my audience. I am so beyond honored week after week that you guys write into me with your most personal stories, that you are willing to tell me face to face, even if you want to be anonymous to the rest of the world. And I just want you all to know I'm here for you. As always, with these audience caller episodes, you can go to luciefink.com/apply and submit an application form to be a guest on the show. We always want to talk about taboo topics, crazy stories, things happening in your life that are hard to talk about. And I am here waving my hand, ready to have the hard conversations with you. I hope you guys enjoy this episode and can feel, even if you disagree with the procedure or, have mixed feelings about it, I just hope that you all walk away with compassion for someone else's situation and that you fall in love with Josie. So let's go into this right now with my audience caller, Josie. If you've been following me for a while, you already know that I'm all about finding those little parenting hacks that actually make your life easier, and Magnetic Me has got to be one of those. When Milo was a very little baby, getting him dressed used to be such a struggle, especially when he was extra wiggly or fussy or entering that toddler stage where he just did not want to sit still. But once I discovered Magnetic Me, it was a total game changer. Their clothes use these magnetic closures instead of buttons or zippers, which means that I could get him and now Coco dressed in seconds with no wrestling required. Now that our mornings around here are extremely busy, those saved moments really add up. So instead of fighting with snaps, trying to get buttons through the holes, or even instead of zipping and like getting skin caught in the zipper, I get to spend that extra time having breakfast with the kids before we head out the door because their pajamas and their clothes literally clothes themselves. Also, we need to talk about how cute everything from Magnetic Me is. Their prints are absolutely adorable. The fabric is incredibly soft and sustainable. If you've ever held a piece of Magnetic Me clothing in your hand, you know what I'm talking about. They have a whole variety of fabrics, but my personal favorites are the modal fabrics. It feels like a cloud. Nothing is softer and stretchier. And so not only am I reaching into the drawer every time to pick these out because the prints are cute, but when I let Milo pick his clothes, he's reaching for the Magnetic Me ones because they're just the most comfortable. And they're always coming out with new collections. I have gifted this brand to so many of my new mom friends because everyone loves them universally. It's like this loved parenting brand that it's not only a gift for the kids because it's clothes for them, but it is a gift for the parents. So go to Magnetic Me, order this today, make changing time a lot easier for you and your little one. These also make such a perfect gift for any new parents or anyone that has a baby. So new customers will get 15% off their first order at magneticme.com. Do not wait. Get online, go to magneticme.com and order them today. Hi, Josie. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for writing in about this topic. When we got your submission, I have to say we get a lot of repeat submissions about the same topic or different versions of the same story, and this was one of a kind. So we did not have any other submissions like this. Before we start, do I call it MAID or MAID?
Yeah, I think I've always called it MAID. That being said, I don't know if that's the correct thing. I know that probably, I mean, I don't even know fully where in the world has this option, but I know some places call it MAID or medical assistance in dying. Some places, or people might know it as like assisted suicide. I think there's just different terms for it.
So it was a term I had heard. I did actually read an article in the past few months about this. It might have been in Canada. My husband sent me the article and he was like, let's discuss. Like we just wanted to talk about it and get our thoughts on it because there's obviously many ethics surrounding it and lots to talk about in regards to it. But I wanted to thank you for your submission because I love when I get the chance on the show to talk about topics that not only are super unfamiliar and just generally interesting human topics to discuss, but also topics that are somewhat uncomfortable, where there's like definitely a layer of taboo-ness going on.
Yeah, for sure.
And I want to just get started by having you, before we even get into the story of what happened, just to sort of describe your relationship with your dad growing up and to take us back to when you were young.
Yeah, for sure. So growing up, I have an older sister. She's 3 years older than me. Growing up, I would say I was definitely the person that was closer to my dad. And I think my sister would agree on that. My mom and my sister probably leaned a little bit closer together. And then me and my dad were just similar people, looked more like, things like that. And then as I got older, generally, I mean, I don't actually know because this is my relationship, but father-daughter relationships can be a challenge, at least from what I hear from other friends and things of that nature. My dad ended up getting diagnosed with cancer when I was in grade 6. He had throat cancer. That definitely obviously caused challenges in the family and between my mom and him. And then my parents ended up divorcing once he was stable, probably not that much long after. There was other little things involved. Obviously, I mean, there's probably a lot more involved into why they separated, but I don't think it was a huge shock. And then after they got divorced, just the relationship was different. I lived full time with my mom. And because at this point we were going into like around high school, teenage age, we lived with my mom, saw my dad on a regular basis. He was a supply teacher, so he had a more flexible schedule. He was able to help drive us to like extracurriculars and stuff like that. but we didn't stay with him quite as much. And I just think the relationship somewhat started to present challenges at that point. And then furthering into my, I guess, adulthood, I went away to university and met my partner. And so the relationship just kind of continued to, I guess, deteriorate or just look different. Obviously, I'm bypassing probably a lot of things that made up of why that happened. But yeah.
When you talk about a strained relationship between a father daughter, and you say, in your case, like how you feel like that could be somewhat common, can you give just some examples of what you mean by that? And I guess I'm trying to gauge if the strain came directly from your relationship with him or if it came from the fact that his relationship with your mom was falling apart.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a mix. I think in some ways it was probably a lot of pressure knowing that I was like I even hate saying this right now, but like the favorite child, and knowing like I very well knew there was conflict between my dad and my sister. They just kind of like bashed heads growing up. My sister is into musical theater. She's loud, like the household was very loud, and those kind of things tended to like bother my dad. And then obviously that led to conflict with my mom being like, this is your daughter. So being kind of what felt like in the middle of that, I think that put a lot of pressure on it in general. And then I guess as I grew up, I just feel like my dad, and I don't know, just socially, he, I think, struggled in certain ways of like being able to connect. Him either saying things that were just slightly out of line or not really asking the questions. Like, I don't know, was he an active parent where he knew what my favorite subject in school was or who my friends, like the names of my friends. Like he just wasn't as actively involved. And the more you progress in that and your parents saying like, what's new? And you're like, well, a lot and nothing, right? I don't want to say you don't know me, but we don't have like that intimate relationship. That just like continued throughout as he got older. And fortunately, I'm noticing this with other relationships in my life. As they get older, like the filter goes away, or I don't know, just more interesting things are said or not said. I don't know, which is a challenge. So
I think it's a combination actually of people getting older and, as you said, the filter going away, or people just, becoming their raw selves at a certain point.
Yeah.
With, that combined with us growing up and starting to see our parents from a different light and starting to recognize flaws that maybe always were there, but when we were younger, we couldn't see.
Yeah. And I'm definitely starting to realize this more in other areas, but as I, get older and you don't need your parent anymore financially or logistically, like you don't need them. You get to choose what you want in your life. And therefore, like if there is inappropriate things being said or they're not showing up the way you want them to, like you can limit that relationship. That probably, whether it was conscious or not, probably happened when certain interactions were less comfortable with him. I maybe for that reason, probably wouldn't see him as much. I know he at one point was dating someone new, and there was just like lots of layers of the relationship slowly like chipping. Yeah.
Can you share some of those phrases or things that he said that you found inappropriate?
Yeah. I don't remember if I heard this verbatim from him or through the grapevine somewhere, but I know at one point he was dating someone who I actually quite liked. They dated probably for like 5 years or so. He had said something along the lines of like, well, of course I love her more than you guys. And I think in his mind, he's like, I love her. And I'm like, yes, but like the relationship with a partner and the relationship with your kid, it's not a competition of who do you love more. Right. And I think that was just, I don't think he meant it maliciously. I think he just fully is like unaware. Yeah. So that was one aspect. I think this like goes actually when I was way younger, but probably in high school, this was definitely probably nearing when my parents were separated. There was definitely like mental health struggles then with him. And I didn't know to what degree, but I remember there was an argument. I think it was with my sister and him, but we had gone for dinner. He was dropping us off. And I remember he like swerved the car out of our driveway, like like once we were home, he left like angrily. And I remember it was like one of the first times I was probably like, let's say 13. I don't know. One of the first times where I remember being like scared for his safety and calling either my mom or I don't know who I called, saying like, dad just swerved off like this, like someone needs to go check. So just like little things that I think as a child, you shouldn't have to see. And unfortunately, we did.
Yeah. Was there ever a stage in your childhood, or was there a tipping point at any point where you started to have a thought of, I don't know how I feel about this guy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I don't know when it happened, but I definitely remember being like, my mom was like the parent. And maybe that's also goes back into why him and I had this fun relationship is he was like the fun parent. I remember my mom used to sing in a choir and she'd go to sing every Wednesday night. So she would be out of the house and my dad, it would be like, go to the grocery store. We'd pick out whatever we wanted. Like it was like fun junk food night, essentially.
Right.
But so that was like super fun. And when you're little, you can be like, wow, it's so fun. And then you get a little bit older and you go, but like but he doesn't know, what I'm allergic to.
Right.
Right. Like
kind
fun,
of important.
But, he has to be reminded maybe of like my birthday. I don't know. That's just an example.
Yeah.
Where you start to realize maybe the fun parent isn't the best parent.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like it's this commonly held belief that parents are required to love their children, but children are not required to love their parents back.
Yeah.
Obviously, in an ideal world, it's a two-way street and a mutual love and a great relationship, but it's not always that way. And I get this is somewhat of an arbitrary sounding question because it's kind of like, what is love? But would you say that you loved your dad?
Yeah. I mean, I do. I do. I think that it makes you question, like, I think I had put this when I emailed in, is everyone meant to be a parent? And I think also as I get older, I don't have kids yet, but as I think to having kids, I just start to realize more and more like adults and parents have no idea what they're doing. And they're just also having the kid and they have their own crap that they're going through and they're just trying to make do with this child. But, so I think I would say I love him and I try to recognize that a lot of the ways in which he parented us or didn't know how to parent in certain ways was based on the way he was raised. And I don't think his parents were super involved. And he was, I think, the youngest child, and his siblings were all like, he was kind of like the black sheep of the family. So I think that goes a lot into it. And then there's the nuances of like, my mom is more probably a type A and probably wore the pants in the relationship. I would still say I love him. I just can have empathy for the situation that he was in, I guess, or that he chose to be in, because especially, however many years ago, you just get married and you have kids versus now it can be a little bit more thought through.
It always goes back to childhood trauma, doesn't it?
Everything. I know.
We need to talk about Rhoback because they just launched leggings. And these are not your average leggings. This is their new Vista collection, and it is giving complete outfit energy, which leggings don't always do. They have buttery, soft leggings, matching bra tops, and the most perfect layering jackets that just tie everything all together. It is not just a glow up for your legging drawer. This is a whole new everyday uniform. The sets come in 4 colors. There's classic black, a gorgeous purple blue color, a sleek navy, and a stunning green. I even heard there's a cocoa brown coming next month, which mentally is already added to my cart. And when I first touched these leggings and felt them between my fingers, I was genuinely amazed by how soft and stretchy they were. I do not know how they did this or what is in these leggings, but whoever designed these deserves a raise. And if you touch them, I know you're going to feel the same way. What I love most about them is how versatile they are as pants. So they're perfect for a morning workout, a quick grocery run, sitting on your couch, pretending to be productive, but really scrolling on social media. Whatever you're doing, if your activewear collection is feeling a little tired, this is your sign to do the upgrade. The Vista collection from Rhoback is the real deal, and I promise you it is about to become your new go-to pair of pants. Use the code all caps real stuff on rhoback.com for 20% off your first order only through the end of this week. That is spelled RHOBACK. BACK.com, and the code is all caps, real stuff. You know what I love? Gummy vitamins, gummy supplements. I have pretty much switched every vitamin in my life to be a gummy because it's just all the more enjoyable, and it's like eating a little bite of candy, but it's actually doing something great for you. And if you have tried all of the health trends, but you still feel like your energy is just not where you want it to be, then it might be time to look a little bit deeper down to the cellular level. And that is where Timeline's longevity gummies come into play. These are the first ever longevity gummies powered by MAID, which is designed to support strength and healthy aging from the inside out. So they work by recharging your cellular batteries, per se. They help improve sustained energy. They support muscle strength. In fact, studies show that MAID can increase your muscle strength by up to 12% after just 16 weeks. These gummies are vegan, gluten-free, non-GMO, free of major allergens. So there's no giant pills, no complicated routines. It's just a daily gummy you could pop into your mouth, enjoy the taste, and it fits right into your lifestyle. If you are looking to stay strong and energized now and as you age, these MAID gummies are a simple and science-backed way to do so. Right now, Timeline is offering the Real Stuff listeners 20% off their order. Just head to timeline.com/realstuff to get started. That's timeline.com/realstuff for 20% off. So now talk us through the whole timeline of after your parents' divorce, and then he goes into different relationships and, you know, kind of carries his life forward and continues. But that leads us all the way up to this big decision that he made. So take us down that timeline and like kind of all the way to the decision.
Yeah. So my parents got divorced. I was probably grade 7, 8. My sister's 3 years older, so she was in high school. And after they divorced, like he had moved somewhere else. It was just normal, whatever. From a health perspective, so like I said, he had had throat cancer. He was very, very tall and thin forever. Like struggled to keep weight on at any point. But after having throat cancer, eating was challenging. He would always be like coughing, and just like swallowing food would be a struggle. So that added to it when you're already someone that's naturally really thin. And then I guess within those next, I can't remember the whole timeline, but he had dated probably various people. And again, sharing probably a little too much information with his daughters, where you're like, I don't need to know that. But he ended up dating one person for, I think, let's say around 5 years. And it actually was like quite healthy for them, or for him. She was very into health, like a marathon runner, vegan, like, and I actually think at that point, my sister at that point's away to university. So their relationship probably stayed fairly similar and maybe not the most positive. Whereas probably in that time, that actually in some ways helped my relationship with him, because his girlfriend at the time was very inviting. They had a house where I could go over, and she would cook and help, I think, neutralize some of his oddities. Yeah. So that was actually good. And then they separated. And again, my dad went to living on his own. And he, like I said, he has siblings, but is not that close with them. And they all live a couple hours away. I don't think his like social bubble was very good. And I had gone away to university at this point once they had broken up. So then my sister and I are both away at university. My mom lives somewhere else. So coming to see him would be specifically going to see him. And his house wasn't a house where we would necessarily feel comfortable to sleep over in. And so we would go visit. But then, right, it was just a couple hour visit and we'd leave. And again, I wouldn't say he was the most, like, it was just challenging to see him. Sometimes you would see him and he would be like, oh, well, I can't eat anything where we're going. Or I'm going to be cold, because at that point he had lost a lot of weight. So he would be cold and just uncomfortable there. And then there was a couple other decisions in there where my dad at one point had said, I'm moving to Costa Rica? I think it was Costa Rica. And he said, I'm moving. I think there was a woman online, or I don't know, but he's like, I'm moving. And again, me and my sister are like, what is going on? And kind of having conversations like behind the scenes with his siblings to be like, has someone vetted this? Like what's going on? Eventually he comes back, probably because travel, like you maybe didn't have a visa or whatever it was. He didn't fully think through it, I don't think. And he gets back, and then within a bit of time, he ends up moving to like a senior's home or community.
How old was he?
I think he was mid 60s.
So that's like relatively very young to be moving into a facility like that.
Yeah. And maybe part of the reasons why he moved there and what we probably hoped for was like, okay, you're going to have community and there's things you can do, and you can go for like an art class. Like he loved painting, and we're like, let's go do those things. But I think as he got more like, it was a cycle of like food was challenging, so then he didn't want to eat, and maybe I don't know taste bud wise if that was affected, but did nothing taste good, so then he doesn't want to eat anything, and then because of that he's tired and cold, and we live in Canada, and so anyways, lots of things going on. And I think that cycle just repeated to probably him isolating himself to his room. And my sister and I would call every once in a while and chat, but those interactions weren't like, it's hard because you want to be there. But then when you're having these conversations that are just like so draining and largely like negative, and it's just hard to do that. Wow, like, now I'm seeing someone, my sister's seeing someone, we have like these happy relationships. Seeing my dad or talking to him was like just a big downer. He, at one point in the mix, he had attempted suicide. Maybe I've blacked it out of my memory, but obviously it was not successful. I think he had left a note or something, and the paramedics ended up being called. So we all knew that had happened. And who knows, that might have been while he was trying to already do MAID, right? But being told, it's not available or whatever. So he was kind of taking things into his own hands, which is not good.
Do you know how he was attempting that?
I think pills.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that was why it was not successful was, oh yeah, this is a morbid statement. He had said something like, I can't even do this right, which is like so sad to think that he is that down on himself, to think that he's saying like, even he can't be successful at doing this, which is really sad. And so that was happening. Then we go to the decision, I guess, for MAID. The timeline to me felt very like, I have this idea, MAID, it was talked about, and this is my memory of it, but like, let's say the whole process was like 6 months. It was like thought about MAID at the beginning, and then nothing was discussed. Like we didn't know anything. He's obviously having conversations with his doctors. And then basically it was nothing all the way to now, okay, and I'm talking to a doctor and now it's going to be booked. And that was in that latter part, felt to me like it was in like a month or two. And throughout that process, I know MAID, at least from what I've heard, a lot of it is very much only to do with people that have terminal conditions or chronic pain, things like that. Like I didn't think he was going to get this granted, but clearly he did. So
the first time he mentions the acronym to you, and you're on a call with him, I assume.
Yeah, or email.
Yeah, and so the first time you hear this and you go type it in and see what it is, what's going through your mind?
I honestly don't think I think, yes, I was sad, and probably sad because I had known about the prior like attempt. But I think I was like, that's not going to happen. And I had actually spoken to a family friend of ours who her mother, I guess, had done MAID for terminal like or chronic pain or I don't know, something along those lines. And I remember, unfortunately, I mean, she meant this well, but speaking with her, and she had said, there's no way, like it's such a long timeline. They're not going to grant it for him. There's so many like legal aspects and this and that. And so I think it was stressful. Like I remember this time being like, what is going on? But because my dad had unfortunately had other far-fetched thoughts, we were like, this is just, it's not happening. But it also raised the interesting point of like, you want someone to die with dignity. And is he going to just say, you're not going to grant this for me, I'm going to do it myself and be successful next time? Yeah, it brings up that challenging point too.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like once someone has agreed to or, gotten the idea in their head that this is something they want to do, it's kind of like, well, if they're not granted access, they'll figure it out another way.
Yeah.
And so I understand why, that would be the thought process you have. So you're saying from the point at which he tells you that and then starts going down the application rabbit hole, it was how many months until he got permission?
I would say it was like brought up, then no discussion of it for like, let's say 4 to 6 months. And then the last bit of it was within like a month or two. So it felt like nothing. And then all of a sudden, and this is again my memory, maybe my sister would have a different memory of what happened, but it felt like nothing. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, the day is booked, like next month.
Oh, wow. And so you were given like a month.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Just for listeners who have never heard about MAID, I'm going to have done some sort of a little bit of an intro that will be added to the beginning of the episode. But do you know about the application process, and why do you think he was ultimately granted access?
In terms of the application process itself, like I have no idea everything involved. I think obviously there's probably a physical evaluation, a psych evaluation, which is interesting because this is I don't know, it has both involved. From what I assume of why he was granted it, I think that doctors thought physically he is going to pass away in the near future, given the state of his body. At that point, he was very, very thin, like extremely thin, concerningly thin. And so his body wasn't functioning well. And so I think they saw it being imminent anyways. And then from a mental health perspective, I think the other layer is they were concerned that he would take it into his own hands if not given permission. And then could that, I mean, I don't know, but for the senior center, could that result in like legal issues if they do, or could he have harmed someone else in the process if he had done it a different way? Like, I don't know. But I wonder if that was part of their decision, was saying it's probably going to happen anyways. And this person is physically and mentally like miserable. Legally, I don't know what they probably put to like let this happen.
Seeing as you sort of felt in your head, like when he first delivered this to you, you felt like it's such a long shot, and then it sort of went away for a while, and then all of a sudden it comes back and he's giving you a day that it's happening. Do you remember how he actually told you about the approval and the day, and what were you feeling in that moment?
Yeah. Like I had said before, my dad struggled socially. And again, this to him was like a good thing. And so I think the news came, I want to say like a text or an email saying like, I don't know if he said the words hurrah, but like for him, like he was like happy about this, saying like, I have a day scheduled. And I remember getting it, and probably myself, my sister, my mom, like in a group chat being like, what is going on? Yeah. I don't even know if I remember like how I felt other than just like in shock, and it didn't really feel real. And you're like, how, what? But also at the same time, you're like, he's so not happy. So it's such a weird conflict in your brain to be going through, of like so sad and you don't want this to happen, but at the same time knowing that it's something that they really want.
I saw in your note to us that you said he was like extremely nonchalant about it and was even calling it D-Day.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I don't know if it was just his way of like adding some lightness to it, or like, I think for him, like I said, he was like happy for this day. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he had like a countdown, because he just was like every day, I think for him getting up was like a struggle. And he was kind of saying like, what did he have to live for? It was heading into winter time. And that winter time was not good when it's freezing in Canada and you're cold already. Yeah. So I think he saw this as a good thing and just something that he wanted to happen.
So I want to get into the ethics of it and just like personal feelings about it in a bit. But first, were you there when it actually happened?
So I was not. My sister and I separately, but with both of our partners, decided within the days leading up to go visit him and spend some time with him. So we did do that, but we had both decided like we cannot see that happen. And maybe others would have wanted to. I just think that from our point of views, like seeing him go through that would have just been very traumatic for us, and remembering that as the last moment. And I don't know, I don't like to even think about, I think it's a pretty quick process. And then you just say, okay. And you like, I don't know. It just was something that we didn't want to go through. So his siblings were there with him.
What was it like in those last visits with him?
So strange. Yeah, like so weird. I hadn't seen him for a little bit at that point, and seeing how like that just reconfirmed how unwell he was. We had gone and seen him, and he was like way more thin than I had remembered. Like it was shocking to see. And like my mom had seen a picture that we had took with him on one of these days, and she was like in shock at how he looked, because it just was not, he was always thin, but it was not good. And the visit itself, yeah, just weird. My husband now, at the time we were dating, he had like talked to my dad about, I want your blessing to propose, because he knew it was the last time. Like just such a strange feeling. And we had like hugged and said bye. And I don't know. Yeah. I don't even know how to explain what it feels like, other than just like odd.
Just for comparison purposes, have you had other relatives or people in your life who have died that it came as more of a shock?
For me, in my life, the only person was my grandma, and she was also unwell. So it was, and I was younger. So you're aware, but less involved. And she was older, or to me at least felt like grandma. I think she actually passed pretty young in the context of everything. But grandparents, you know that they're going to pass at some point. So it felt more, I guess, normal. And that's like my own from my family. Now there's been other experiences like with my husband, members of my husband's family, but for the most part, people close that have passed have been older. And you just think, they were happy and they passed, because that's what happens.
And the reason I ask that is because I've lost a few people in my life who, it was either random and a traumatic loss, or it was sort of a slow demise at the end. But even still, you don't know when it's going to happen. And so there does become a point where if it is an older person who's sick and sort of withering away physically, every visit feels to you like this could be the last, but you're not really sure. There's always hope of it maybe there may be being another visit or a recovery or something. Whereas just the psychology behind the knowledge of the day someone's going to die is such a bizarre thought. We all are walking around having no idea if we have 10 minutes left or 100 years. And that's just the way life is, because things don't really happen on, death does not happen on a defined timeline. And then you introduce something like this. And in my head, there's these two sides of it, because there's this extremely dystopian side of how strange that we're scheduling this in the calendar, and this is not the way that dying is supposed to be, and just like the weirdness of it. And then on the other end, it's like, well, actually, why isn't it the way it's supposed to be? Why do we have to wait until someone is in pain for 7 years and then their body finally gives out? Or is someone is like so unhappy in life and is trying to take their own life in other ways, and they're suffering with severe, untreatable mental illness? Why do they have to be suffering? Is there a humane way to allow them to exit? But then it opens up so many other questions of, well, is there a way to get them help so that they can be rehabilitated? Like, you hear stories of people who have attempted suicide and then completely make these 180 recoveries and come back and then are giving speeches on stages about the meaning of life. And so there's so many avenues it could go, but I'm more struck with being in the position of being a close family member or a daughter of one of these people, where it's like simultaneously one of the worst things that could happen, but also one of the easiest ways to lose someone. Like, it's just this weird dichotomy. And I'm so curious how you feel about it, and ethically all of your thoughts around MAID.
Yeah, no, it is really weird. And it made grief also that much weirder. There were so many layers of like grieving it. I feel like in some ways, and part of that it's MAID, but it's also the relationship with my dad wasn't perfect. It was rocky. And so all those layers grieving it as well. And I know that when people had found out that he had passed, people sending their condolences, obviously not my people closest to me knew, but other people didn't. And so like some of these condolence messages didn't really feel like they made sense. Or when someone says like, I lost my dad too, I know what you're going through. I'm like, so different. Like I can't even, and it's not worth, right. And not to say one is harder than the other, because I think it would be a very different situation if your dad was like your best friend and it did come as a shock. Like that is so hard in other ways. So just, yeah, really strange. I think that not that there is, I don't know how often this is happening, but I do think about like elderly people. There's probably versions of this that we're not necessarily calling MAID. We're calling it, okay, we give them the pain meds and we take the ventilator off.
Right.
And it's, you don't have the exact day, but the doctors can probably assume they're not going to last much longer. So there's versions of this, but it's still, I guess, letting their body do it naturally. Yeah, just feels very complicated. I don't know if I would say, oh, I now feel this way about MAID or don't, because I just think it's so complicated. And every person's situation is different. So I don't know if I could say, oh, now I think I agree that it should be an option, because the next person's decision to do it is going to be completely different from my dad's decision, which I still grapple with thinking about if it should have happened.
I'm always on the hunt for products that promise to do something amazing for me and my body, and then actually deliver on that promise and make a difference. And Happy Mammoth is one of those products. Their prebiotic collagen protein is not just about hair, skin, and nail health, although yes, it absolutely does help with those things. But this product goes deeper. This formula combines grass-fed collagen peptides with prebiotic fibers that support your gut. And as we all know, when your gut feels good, everything else in your life feels better. For me, what this has meant is fewer occasional gut issues, more steady energy, just an overall lift in my well-being. A lot of people like adding this to their morning routine, and that's a great way to start the day. Personally, I love using this around travel because that's when my gut personally needs the most support. I have noticed fewer midday crashes, even when I'm hopping time zones, and I love knowing that I'm adding something in simple that supports me from the inside out. Plus, the vanilla flavor is so good. And what I really love about Happy Mammoth is that it is a brand created for women. Their products are science-backed, inspired by nature, and they actually address what our bodies uniquely need. They also gave me a special deal for the Real Stuff listeners, and you can try their prebiotic collagen protein risk-free and get 15% off your entire first order with the code, all caps, Real Stuff. Just go to happymammoth.com and use code Real Stuff at checkout. That's 15% off today at happymammoth.com with the code, all caps, Real Stuff. After he died, when you guys had some sort of funeral for him or, gathering with loved ones, if you did, I don't know if you did, but
We did.
Did you share all the details with everyone who knew him and everyone that was sending you condolences? Did everyone know that this was the method by which he died? Or did you guys just tell people that his body gave out?
Yeah, I think for me and my relationships with like the people that I knew, just my like close friends, I would have told them. I think if someone had asked like what happened, I probably would have given, I don't know if I would have told them the details of it, but said, he was really sick. And maybe at the funeral, people knew because it was, my parent, like my mom and her husband there. So they obviously knew through us. And my husband was there and aunts and uncles that all have a connection. So they were probably told, but I don't actually know. The funeral itself didn't touch on it, at least not that I don't remember anything touching on it. It felt like a normal, but just a typical funeral. I mean, I know me and my sister were very emotional, but to others, I think they weren't, it wasn't a shock. I don't think other people were like struggling quite as much as we were.
Does the organization that administers this provide any sort of resources to the family or like connect you with other people who have been through it and, you know, give you any support through this?
Not that I'm aware of. Unless, you know, it's very possible that they sent resources to my dad and he, I don't know, like maybe it was a brochure and he didn't think to do anything with it, or an email or whatever, but we didn't have any resources. Like I remember after trying to Google things on this, but again, what I was struggling with was the layers of this, of like, okay, I might be able to find a resource or a support group on MAID, but likely the other people in this are going to be people where it was, you know, someone had terminal cancer and they were, you know, they made this decision. Maybe I'm just making assumptions. Or I was Googling resources on like losing someone that you have a challenged relationship with. But is there a book or a resource for someone died by MAID and you have a struggling relationship with them? And it was somewhat mental health, somewhat like there's so many layers of this that I didn't really find anything that felt right to me. So I think my sister and I really leaned on each other in it because we were the only ones that knew, like even our partners knew aspects of what we told them about growing up with him, but didn't know everything. And so my sister and I had a very similar relationship to say, you know, this is how he was,
Right.
That other people wouldn't necessarily get.
It's just such a complicated topic, and it's also, I feel like, very untalked about, and I'm sure there are going to be so many people who hear this episode who are like, I've never even heard of this.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. I thought this was something you do for dogs who are told that they like, you know, need to be put down if they're not doing well, but hearing it for humans is like a strange concept just given everything about our society. I believe so strongly in, you know, if we're talking about another avenue of life, like my body, my choice with almost every area of life. But then I'm trying to wrap my head around, do I also believe that someone who is somewhat physically stable, like I do think it's a little bit of a different situation when someone is about to die from some sort of terminal illness. But, and as you're describing your dad, it maybe he is fitting into this category of like will pass away from physical reasons, you know, in the short term. But for someone who's not, like if we think of another person who just has severe mental health issues, who is unhappy, I don't know that I'm there yet where I can get behind a person who's over 18 who has severe depression, just deciding to go do this and us like rallying behind them and supporting them and assisting them in doing it.
Yeah,
because that feels to me like it's almost like they're attempting to harm themselves in any other way, and people are either like helping them do that or just turning a blind eye and being like, okay, if that's what you want, your body, your choice. Versus societally, what is our role as a society in having someone apply to this and tell us that their main reason for wanting to do this is just that they're unhappy and that, you know, winter is coming and I'm always depressed in the winter and I don't want to be alive anymore. And even maybe if there is a layer of like, I'm in chronic pain or I whatever, and having that be the conclusion of like, okay, well then let's just say goodbye and end it all, versus like, here's all the protocols that we have to do before we can agree to this, which it's so complicated because it's also like, it is that person's choice. Like, why? It's a weird question. And I still don't even have my answer as to what I think is right or wrong. It's just like the type of thing that once it hits home and it's happening to someone in your family, you have to then peel back the layers of that onion and it gets so complicated and tricky.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And like, I would absolutely agree with, especially I think if it was someone young or I don't know, but if someone was just like, I want to do this purely for mental health reasons, I would be like, no. Like at that point, I think it's society or healthcare. And that's a whole other challenge in itself of what resources are being provided to people with just like really struggling mental health.
Yeah.
And are we supporting them the way that they should, right? Like I know there's scenarios where people are getting told, you know, if you want help, but it's not really helping. I agree that I wouldn't be on board with that. I would think no, but then in this situation, you see the other side of like, maybe it was the physical and maybe that is what like the doctors put on there. Like, I don't know which got prioritized.
Yeah, I would have to believe it was the physical.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you think about even from the physical health side of things, someone has to want to do it. Like they could have said, okay, you're struggling physically. Let's have a feeding tube so that you can start to gain more weight. And then that's going to start making you warmer. Let's get your hormones checked so that maybe it's thyroid issues. Like, but that would have required whoever, him or whoever this is that we're talking about, to do those things and want to say, yes, I'm going to get a feeding tube, right?
Right.
But if you say, don't, no, I don't want that, then likely you're eventually going to pass unless your body is just not giving up.
Unfortunately, it sounds like your dad had two, like both ends of the spectrum were affected negatively, where the physical stuff wasn't doing well and mentally he didn't have the drive and sounds like he didn't feel like he had the reason to keep fighting for it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some people who are physically, falling apart or have a terminal illness, their mental health could be in tip-top shape and they can really be in a place where they're like, I'm willing to do whatever to hold on for not just myself, but like these people. And it's important to me that I stay alive. So I will do anything, even if it's inconvenient, even if it's painful. Like,
Yeah.
I know someone who's going through, she was on a podcast, she was a guest on the podcast, and she is my age, was told she has 5 years to live with terminal brain cancer, and is doing like the most intense treatment with this like cap she has to wear every day, and it's heavy, and she is a mom, and so she gets all this back pain from wearing this device, but she's like, I'm gonna do whatever I can to get however many extra months or years here. But when you have someone who, no matter what they're going through physically, the mental health is not aligned, it's like you can't force a feeding tube down their throat. You can't be like, we need to do all these blood tests, because they don't even have the drive to want to make it work.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe there was phase one before where there was that feeling of, I'm going to do everything. And then maybe as those things didn't work, they decided to not do those things anymore. Right. So that could have been part of it as well, of like, has he been through that stage where now he's saying, well, I went to the doctor and they said, there's nothing you can do. Like, I feel like that sounds familiar to me, of him saying like, the doctor said there's nothing we can do, and hearing that, right? Like that would mentally really impact things as well.
Do you feel like, are you in therapy recurringly?
I think I'm like on and off therapy, not necessarily for this. So.
Okay. I was going to ask, do you feel like you're working through this as a major element in your life, like something that's constantly on your mind, or is it not?
Thankfully, I would say it's not. But I think grief, and probably anyone would say this, that it like comes not when you expect it, or in just like weird ways, or it comes like, I would say day to day, I'm okay. And it's now been almost 3 years. And I would say, yeah, day to day, I'm not thinking about it. But then there'll be like a little moment where a song will play that was like a song that I really connected to him. And then I'm like flooded back with grief. Or I had gotten married after this all happened. And in one way, it was like really hard for me to be like, he's not going to be at my wedding. But then I also thought about what would have that been like with him at the stage being at my wedding. Would he have not been comfortable and things like that? But I had watched, like, I was at someone else's wedding and watched a father-daughter dance, and just like broke down. Like I needed to step out. So I think it comes in different stages.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting how there's like a trade-off with it, because I think one of my big fears about death and dying, which, I don't feel too scared of all the time, but if I really think about it, I feel like the thing about someone dying that causes me the most anguish is sort of wondering how they're feeling in the moment of dying. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like I translate my own feelings to how they must have been feeling, where like I feel scared and anxious about it. And so I imagine them feeling scared, and that makes me kind of feel bad for them and feel sad for them. And then it's like, now they're dead. And so I hope they weren't scared, or I hope that they felt comfortable or whatever. That's one element that gets totally taken away. like as far as grief goes, you don't have to think about your dad and think, oh, I feel so bad for him that he lost his life, because he wanted to. And like 99.9% of people who died don't want to. Like that element's totally taken out of it, which is a positive for you as far as grieving. Like at least that is out of the equation. But then what's added to the equation is the fact that he made this decision in the first place, which is like, in a weird way, even though it's not like he's harming you, it's like he kind of is harming the rest of the family, and making this decision for himself can be viewed in a bit of a selfish, how could you do this to us kind of a way. And so there's like this added layer on the front end that you had to deal with that most people don't have to deal with. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure it balances itself out at the end of the day. But as far as your grieving process, did you feel that what I was just trying to describe, where when you actually thought about him dying, like maybe you felt more at peace about it after the fact, because versus someone dying traumatically and you just having to go home and process that, you probably processed it before mostly.
Yeah. To be honest, I think a lot of the processing happened within probably that month. I don't even know how to explain this. And I'd be curious if someone like psychologically could be like, this is what was happening. But I felt very like outside myself about the situation. So in one way, I was like actually grieving his death, but I like felt almost like a third party watching myself, being sad for myself that this was the outcome. Like I remember being like feeling sad, being like this, knowing that this wasn't the relationship I wanted or wasn't the ending I wanted, being like, how am I, like, I don't know. It's such a weird feeling to be feeling this. I'm sad for myself in this.
Yeah.
You're going through this. That I think was like the biggest thing of grieving it, was being like, how is someone, I think at that time, 25-year-old going through this, and why is this the relationship? And like thinking about me as like a little girl being like, why did this have to end the way it did? Mm-hmm. And thankfully I was with my sister. My mom, actually, we spent the time, I think it was the weekend or a couple of days together around this. So we were able to talk to each other about it. And my mom was just kind of there like as support for us. But yeah, a lot of, I think the grief happened in the month before, just questioning like, why is this how it had to go?
Yeah, I'm not a psychologist, but from how you're describing it, I would say it just sounds like dissociation as a coping mechanism for you being in this position that you just truly never wrapped your brain around being a possibility.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like you're hearing that it's happening to you, but it's like the type of thing that maybe happens in movies, and you're like watching it from afar being like, how is this
happening?
The me that I know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was definitely it. Like, it was just really confusing being like, I am sad, but I'm sad watching myself be sad.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. I wonder if anyone's listening and knows more about that, tell us in the comments. And I want to just wrap this up, because I always love to ask people who write in with these stories of personal things happening in their lives and they want to come on a podcast to talk about it. Can you just share a little bit about what you're hoping people take away from this? Maybe like a final lesson that you've learned about compassion at the end of life, and or, why you want to talk about this and what you want people to know.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest reason why I submitted this was just there aren't resources on this. And when I was going through it, I didn't feel like I had anyone really that there was people I could go to, but they weren't in this situation. And so I hope that if there's someone listening to this and maybe it isn't MAID, maybe it's a different version and something touches home for them, but that it can help them understand how complicated death and grief is, especially when there's a struggling relationship. And I think I felt a lot of guilt for being okay or questioning it. And then like, it's just so many emotions. So I just hope whoever is hearing this, if there's someone that feels a little bit of like, okay, I'm not alone. It's okay for it to feel so confusing and to not know or understand. I think that's my hope for this. And then, yeah, everything goes back to like childhood trauma. It does provide some empathy of everything that went through his life and that led to this decision was based on how he was raised and things that he went through. And sure, yes, we put parents as a pedestal of like, you're the dad, but he's also a person that was just struggling clearly immensely. And so I hope he is at peace and looking down and we're able to kind of move on from all this.
Agreed. Well, we're all sending you so much love to you and your sister and your mom and your family, and cannot thank you enough for writing in and coming on to talk about this. And I hope it touches someone very personally and that someone can learn a lot from it.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Josie. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Real Stuff podcast. If you're liking the show, please head over to Apple or Spotify and leave us a written review. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment down below and join in the conversation. And if you're feeling called to be a guest on the show, visit luciefink.com/apply and tell us your story. Thank you so much, as always, for sharing your time and attention with us, and we will see you next time on the Real Stuff podcast.
Please note that this episode may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products and services. Individuals on the show may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to in this episode.